think I'm doubting. I think I'm doubting Christianity. Is it true even? Is it good? I'm doubting the foundations that I've built my life upon, my family, my friends, my community, and I think it terrifies me.
To all my ex-Christians out there, what was the turning point for you?
My name is Jake, and this is my deconversion story.
I no longer consider myself to be a Christian.
We don't have the original Bible.
So you're saying that this is what the Bible says, but that seems kind of harsh to me.
It's been years that God had not been answering my prayers.
It was the treatment of that group.
It just stopped working for me.
This is my story. I grew up in the church. I'm a pastor's kid. I remember surrendering my life to Christ at a really young age at the bedside with my dad, where I repented of my sins. I received God's forgiveness. I quickly learned all the right answers. I learned how to love my neighbor. I learned all of the Bible questions. Highly involved at my church, doing street evangelism, discipleship, small groups. And honestly, as I looked back in my life, I saw the Lord do some amazing things in high school. I had this amazing testimony, I felt like, that when I would share it, people would respond. This story of a massive dirt bike accident and my faith moving from my head to my heart to my hands. And pretty soon, the more I got involved, I felt this personal call into ministry. This personal call to share the good news of Jesus is a vocation. I went on missions trips. It was stages. It was leading worship. This was my everything. This deep desire that I had in my life to speak and to write for a job, to do this with my life, it became a reality as I had the opportunity to hop on the road with a renowned apologist, Josh Mcdowell, as his personal assistant. And then one night he sits and he asks me to become a speaker for his ministry. And a little over a year ago, a friend handed me a book. He asked me to review it. And I had heard murmurings about this friend. He didn't believe that the Bible was authoritative or reliable. He didn't believe in this thing called original sin. Almost this idea of wanting Jesus's love without his commandments, without almost the sense of obedience. And genuinely, as I read this book, I was deeply challenged. I was presented with arguments that I could not answer, and on top of this, my friend was deeply caring. I felt like he genuinely loved people, and on top of it, he was wicked smart. Every objection in a conversation that I felt like I brought up, or have you thought about it this way, or what if you're wrong here, he had answers to those things. As I read his book and I was presented with these arguments, I was frustrated. I felt like, man, I'm in this world. You gotta understand that I've been to the apologetics camps, I've been to the conferences, I've read the books, I've got a master's in theology, and there was something going on inside of me that I did not want to be there. I felt like I had to defend Jesus. I felt like I had to defend Orthodox Christianity. I felt like I had to be convinced of what I had been taught my whole life. And so I started watching stories of deconstruction. I started watching stories of real pain and real questioning of, why did God do that in this person's life? What if the foundations that we've built our life upon are actually wrong? And then the pain began to come for myself. This core lie belief that I often believe about myself, that I'm not enough, it came bursting forth as one of my really good friends who was close to me that I did life with, his sin was exposed. His actions had major consequences on not only his life, but somebody else's, and I could do nothing about it. On top of that, I experienced real pain and loss as I had two close people to me pass away. A 17-year-old who I felt like her life was unjustly taken through cardiac arrest. And as I'm wrestling with these deep feelings of emotion, I'm involved in this cohort of young Gen Z evangelists that are on fire for Jesus, sharing their faith. And I prepped and I went to this conference and I spoke for a weekend, all for this evangelistic message. And I presented the gospel at the end thinking, I'm an evangelist. People are gonna come to Christ. I share the gospel. I ask if anyone wants to surrender their lives to Christ, and nobody raises their hands. And there was just this breaking point as I walked off that stage. And I just sat there and I thought to myself, man, I call myself an apologist and I can't answer my friends' questions. I call myself an evangelist and nobody raises their hands. The thoughts flooded my mind, is this even real? Is the gospel just empty words? And as these questions rise, the fear comes up of, what will my family think? What will my friends think? My community? What will my wife think? My life was built around the person of Jesus, and the feelings I had were terrifying. So I began to dig deep. The questions that I was having, the intellectual questions, I found answers. Questions about the Bible's reliability, questions about God existing in the first place. Is Christianity true? Questions about Jesus, him rising from the dead. I found answers to the core things that Christianity hangs on, but the doubts were still there. And I quickly began to realize that this was not just an itch of the mind, it was an itch of the heart. And I felt like I reached the end of this road into the unknown and I didn't know where to go. All I knew is the questions that I was carrying. Is Christianity true? Is Christianity even good? Is God good to me? Is Christianity even worth it? And I had no idea how to answer those questions. And so I just started researching. I spent so many days just listening to lectures, sitting back and taking notes from people way smarter than me who have journeyed through this before. I picked up their books, I read them, I sat with the ideas, but at the heart, I was lonely and I didn't know where to go. This is what I began to find. I wasn't alone in my doubts. See, doubts are not just a Christian thing. Doubts are a human thing. I came across this one Barna study and it says that 2/3 of Christians face doubt. That means that 66% of the people around me have questioned their faith, have wrestled like I am. The second thing is that I still had an immense amount of fear. I don't know if we totally realize it or not in our everyday lives, but we live our lives based upon our beliefs. And when those things crumble, it's scary. There's unknown, things are out of our control. I found this study back in 2016 where a group of professors wanted to see how counter evidence to someone's held beliefs affects their brain. And here's what the study found out. It's amazing. After all of this brain research, it said this: our brains signal threats to deeply held beliefs in the same way that they might signal threats to physical safety. So when my beliefs were challenged, it was almost the same feeling as if I was in physical danger. And this made sense as I would push down the beliefs and not want to deal with them. I wanted to protect myself. In The Influential Mind by Tali Sharot, it says that when our brains, when they process counter evidence to previously held beliefs, they literally shut off to protect themselves. Serious beliefs are grounded in values and identity. It's not just some simple thing of what is true and false. We build our lives on our beliefs, and when they're challenged, we feel like we're stepping out into the fear of the unknown. I kept researching and I kept learning, and I finally came across a guy named Gary Habermas. He's one of the leading scholars on the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. And I came across one of his books. It's called Dealing with Doubt. And it gave me peace because for the first time I heard someone differentiate between intellectual doubts and emotional doubts.
Let me start with the definition. Uncertainty regarding God or our relationship with Him. It often starts with a fairly simple question. You may think it's really, really complicated. If you get it when it's a simple question, it's usually sort of like, great. But when doubt sits there and festers, it gets deeper and it starts affecting other areas of us. How do you identify emotional doubt? Emotional doubters usually ask very similar questions to factual doubters, but they ask it for different reasons. Here's two signs of emotional doubter. Number one, the most typical kinds of questions are what if questions. What if we're wrong? If facts don't make it go away, then it's more than factual doubt.
A few years ago, Josh McDowell told me this principle, and that's a problem well defined is half solved. And these little pieces of information that I learned, it gave me a starting place. It gave me the peace that I'm not alone, that people have wrestled through these things before, that my beliefs are fearful because they're connected to my identity and my value, and that I can't just sit and think in the intellectual. I have to wrestle with the emotional. I really had no idea how to deal with the emotional piece and the emotional wrestling. So I started out with, how do I know, how can I figure out if something is true? So in your doubts, you are not alone. People have wrestled through these things before and come to solid conclusions. So would you weigh the evidence? Would you seek truth? Would you journey with